Hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Here we talk about frugal living, living below your means, and just learning to not be so spendy and being a saver instead. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how I stopped living paycheck to paycheck. One of the things I started to do, and it's so simple, but I'm not joking when I say this felt like an impossibility to me before. So if I say this and it sounds like it's an impossibility for you, I get it. I understand why you're feeling that way because I felt the same way. Now what I do, I mentioned it in previous videos, is whatever money I make, I minus 20%. 20%. Whatever's left, that is what I live on. I pretend that other 20% isn't even there. I live on the 80% that's left. Why do I do that? That 20% is building margin. It's giving you breathing room. It means that you get your paycheck and you're not spending every last bit of it. Where's that 20% going? That's up to you. For me, that 20% is a buffer between me and disaster. So I've used it to build up a buffer in my checking account. So I always have a few months of expenses in my checkings account. I'm a month ahead on my bills. So I have a bills account where all my bills come out of. And in that account, I always have the amount that my bills are. I don't give like my actual numbers, but let's say my expenses were $2,500 a month. I always have that $2,500 in there, even after paying all my bills for the month. And how I did that is by always minusing that 20% from whatever I have coming in. It feels impossible. I know. It feels like you could never do that. I know that because I felt like that. But the moment you realize, let's just pretend you made 20% less than you actually make, what would you do? How would you live? What would you change? What would you cut out to make it work? That's how I started to think. I started to pretend I actually didn't have that other 20%. I started to act like I made less than what I actually did. And when you change your mindset about how much you have coming in, that you don't actually have your whole paycheck to spend, it changes everything. When I actually say, no, I don't have, let's say your paycheck is $1,800 bi-weekly, every 2 weeks. You say, okay, I don't actually have $1,800. I'm gonna minus 20%. I'm gonna minus, let me do the math, 360 from that. I don't even have that. I can't budget it because I don't have it. I have to live on the rest, whatever's left over. If I was listening to this, that this would feel like a mountain that I could not climb. So if you're feeling that way, I understand. Maybe don't start with 20, maybe start with 10%, maybe start with 5%. But creating margin in your budget is the most important thing. You need margin. You cannot get ahead in life if you're spending every last dime of your paycheck every time you get paid. That's just a fact of life. If you spend every cent you have when it comes in, you will have nothing. It took me 43 years to understand this. And I really hope that you get this today and that you don't wait 43 years. Because this concept changed my life, my financial life anyways. I lived with a Christian couple from my church when I first became a Christian, and I lived in their basement, and they let me stay there for free. I paid $0 for 4 years. How much money did I save? $0. I saved none of it. I spent every dime I had. What did I spend it on? I don't know. When you don't have any vices like gambling, drugs, alcohol, you know that money is going somewhere. And for me, it was shopping. It was just nickel and diming my money away, not watching every dollar that I made. I would just have all these tiny purchases and they all added up to hundreds and thousands of dollars. Which is why I really harp on the whole, every dollar matters, because it really does. If you want to get ahead in life on a low income or on a, maybe even medium income, because in this day and age, even, $60,000 used to be like a good income, and now it's even hard to live on that. So even if you're making 60,000, what if you pretended you didn't make 60,000? What if you minus 20%? What if you said, no, actually I make $12,000 less than that. I actually make, let me do the math, $48,000. What if you made, and at one time in your life, you probably did make $48,000 and you lived on it. You lived off of that and you were okay. So I just suggest pretend like that is your income. And what would you do differently in your life to live on that amount of money? And I know there's always things we can cut, and people always think there isn't, but there always is. And also, what are things you can do to reduce those big ticket items in your budget, like your grocery bill, rent, or your mortgage? Can you get a roommate? That's a game changer. If you can have someone rent a room out of your house, or if you have an extra bedroom in your apartment. Is it inconvenient? Sure. Yeah, it's probably more inconvenient than you not doing that, but it creates margin. It creates breathing room where you can actually get ahead in life. And having money in the bank and not feeling like you're waiting for the next paycheck because you're not going to make it if you don't get it, that is an exhausting feeling. And I am so grateful that I no longer have that anxiety, and I'm very grateful. And I know things can change on a dime. So I think that's the other thing to really be aware of, that the less money you need to live on, the more secure you're going to be. Because then if something tragic happens and you lose your job, it's actually easier to stay afloat. You need less money to live on. So you'd need less of an emergency fund. You could get a job, maybe a part-time job, and still maybe float your expenses until you got, a permanent job because you kept your expenses so low. These are the benefits of living a small, quiet, but good life. And when I say small, quiet, I don't mean like you never do anything. There's so many things you can do that are free. And also, why not spend your money on the things that you care about? And that was a big thing for me as well. I stopped wasting my money on the things that I cared nothing for. The things that I care about are providing for my boys, providing for my future, like my retirement, so I don't have to work until I'm dead. We want to travel. I love traveling with my boys. It's fun. It's a bonding time for us. That is my priority. I would rather save up my money and work and spend my money on those things that matter to me. So let me recap what I just went over. Try to live on less than what you make. So that for me was minusing 20% from whatever I have coming in and living on the difference. And I just pretend that that is my income. And when you make that mental shift in your head that that is your income, you know you can cut stuff. You know if you had a 20% pay cut today, that you would make it work. And what would you do to make it work? And just focus on the things that matter the most to you. Okay, guys, that's all I have for you. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you don't feel discouraged. I hope you don't feel overwhelmed thinking that you can't do it, because I know you can. Okay, guys, thanks. Bye.